What's up, Kenny? It's Brandon. How are you, buddy?
Hey, Brandon, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing okay. Do me a favor. I jotted down a bunch of things, and again, I watched it. It's about, I don't know, 15 or 16 minutes. It's on your personal Facebook account. For those who haven't had a chance to see it, and I encourage them to do it, but for those who haven't seen it yet, just give us a very brief summation what your objective was behind the post.
Well, I think my objective was to, one, after the event, last week, I kind of reopened the wounds of, the judicial system and as obviously as well with law enforcement with the, African American community. So my objective was that not only just to bring awareness to some of the disproportions, but also to come up with some possible solutions. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that as NBA players, I was speaking directly to them and to us, former NBA players, but because I think that we might not have created the problem, but we might have the antidote.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but people who don't know this now, our background, aside from the fact that you were an outstanding basketball player and I averaged 7 points on CYO teams, back in the day, we're actually from basically the same place. You went to Archbishop Malloy, I went to Xavier in Manhattan. Both boys now Malloy has girls, but boys, all boys and discipline. You played for Jack Kern, one of the best coaches of all time. I believe, Kenny, and maybe I'm wrong, I believe that people like us from New York who travel in the city and interact and have to blend and mix with all races, religions, and ethnicities, I believe that we're maybe a little more conditioned inherently to deal with and flourish with other people because we're exposed to it at an earlier age. Would you agree with that premise?
I would think that there's an advantage to meeting people at an earlier age, but I think that honestly, there's been probably, as I put it, a wave of injustice and in terms of in America. So the wave was, segregation, no blacks allowed, separate but not equal, and now we're dealing with the undercurrent
Mm-hmm.
of that, and the undercurrent a lot of times is more deadly and a lot of times more powerful because, and that would be, disproportionate rates in jail for African Americans. African American men make up 6% of the nation, but 40% of the jails. Like just a disproportionate rate.
No, I know the
So
numbers. Mm-hmm.
things like that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I know most people who are, follow kind of realize the numbers now, but when you hear them, they kind of sink in.
That's true.
You're talking about things of that nature, ownership or, college testing. Those are the undercurrent things that are, that we found out are that really hold you back even more. And so I think now we're dealing with more of an undercurrent
Mm-hmm.
instead of a wave of injustice.
I think you position that well, and I also think you're right. Undercurrents are more dangerous because, unfortunately, more time, not always, but more times than not, it's laced with emotion rather than logic. And we know that emotion could obviously lead us to bad places, both sides. We're talking to Kenny Smith with us here on Tiki and Tierney, CBS Sports Radio. From my perspective, and I have the white perspective. You have the African American perspective. We're both smart enough to incorporate both, but in our, what we know inherently is one more than the other. And one thing that bothers me, my dad's a retired New York detective for 20 plus years in Manhattan. Then there's a notion that's being fed on the mainstream media, in my opinion, that police basically stick guns to the temple of every young black man that they pull aside. Now, we know that that's obviously not true. And I want to ask you this, Kenny, and maybe you have a better answer, and maybe, quite frankly, you just have the guts to say it, and I have the guts to ask it. I don't believe, and listen, we don't need to waste time on the bad cops. We know there's bad cops that exist. We all have to admit that. But I also believe that until younger, and actually all, or those who have issues, African Americans begin accepting on some level the authority and not fighting police when they're pulled over right away, that inflames the situation. When I get pulled over, here's my license, here's my registration, go on your way. Now, I know that that's a broad stroke, and that's sometimes dangerous, but I feel like there's an authority within some young black men to resist arrest, and that's not their right.
Yeah, I agree with that part of it, but that was exactly what if the evidence is correct that Mr. Castillo had did. He said, "We, go and get your driver's license and registration," and that's when he got shot. So because he had informed them that he had a gun as well that was registered. So
Mm-hmm.
there is a disparity I think before we can get to that point, I think there's a bigger issue of fear that, or not even fear. I think that there is a thought process that a lot of police officers have that to diffuse a situation with young Black Americans, it's easier to diffuse the situation by force. And I'll give you another stat since we threw out. We're sports guys.
Mm-hmm.
In the first 24 days of 2015, more people were killed by police than in 24 years in England.
Do you have the
24 days.
Do you have the racial background on that stat? How was that split up?
Well,
Because that's important.
Obviously, yeah, it's important because proportionally, we look at this year already, 558 have been killed. So 114 are African American men, and we only make up again 6% of the country. So we're not getting a 6% proportion rate. So obviously, even if you spread it equally upon there, it's not working correctly. And I think that there is this diffusion that you need to diffuse situations in the African American community. And I think that, yes, maybe there's an acknowledgement of what you're saying, but there's first have to be acknowledgement of, you know what, we haven't been doing it correctly and we can do better. It's kind of like when you don't trust someone. And, there's been a history of reason why you shouldn't trust police in an African American community. There's been reasons, the same police, my uncles, the dinner tables at my house probably were a lot different. Where my uncles would say, "Hey, yeah, I was trying to go to University of Alabama, and they sent the dogs on me."
Yep.
You're like, whoa, that's the same police, the same judicial system. So there's a lack of trust.
But it's not. Well, but it's not the same. But it's not the same police literally, and that's what worries me. Like,
yeah, it is.
I can't defend, but I can't. Kenny,
was only 61 years ago.
Yeah.
My dad is not.
I can't defend history.
Rosa Parks was only 61 years ago.
I understand that. Kenny, I get that. I can't defend that. I won't even try. It's appalling and it's reprehensible. But 61 years ago, that's 3 or 4 different generations of policemen. Do they feel the same way? I would submit that they don't. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I would say that the dinner tables at my house created an actual distrust for the law enforcement. Not saying I wouldn't abide by the law.
I got you.
Saying I don't think that there's good cops. Don't think that I'm a law-abiding citizen.
I got you.
But there's a distrust, and there has to be an acknowledgement that, you know what, we have to do better. And I think that distrust also at other dinner tables is saying, hey, don't trust these guys because this is what happens if you try to trust them. And I think that has to be acknowledged, and I think that's first because I don't think the burden of proof is on the African-American community or even anyone, honestly. If you don't trust someone, it's not my burden to show you how to trust me.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Prove your trust.
Yeah.
And if you look at the judicial system, you look at the police, and you look at all the statistics, and you add up, and you go, nah, we don't trust the police because, we're going to get a ticket. We're going to get arrested for that not having a ticket because you're in a poor neighborhood, and it's related to African American and poor neighborhoods. Because you're poor, you don't pay a ticket, you go to jail. You're rich, you just pay the ticket.
Yeah, and you move on.
You got the money. You go, okay, you go light bill, you go pay the ticket. You go, oh, I'm paying my light bill. So, now you get stopped again for going through a traffic. Now you go to jail. It's a different proportion. It's really a poor socioeconomic as well as black problem that they have to acknowledge that this is not right. The system doesn't that system doesn't work.
Kenny,
what I was saying was also lastly is I think that the NBA players have the antidote, and I just challenge these guys to allocate 10% of their salary to the communities that they've come from. 10%. They give their agent 10%. This dude just makes a phone call. He makes a phone call. But and the amount of money, and so we say disproportionate rates, and this is why I say we have the antidote. We only make up, like I said, 6% of the country, but we make up 74% of the NBA. 74. So that allows that $90 million per team per year per salary cap goes to 74% of the African American men in that league,
Mm-hmm.
in our league, which means we are the richest black men in America as a group. There's no question
No,
about
it's
it.
no question.
There is no question about it. So now you can make a social economic impact, which creates empowerment and creates education and creates opportunities that allow you to skip past all of the things that go on for a big group. It will allow a big group to skip past certain things that they have to deal with now. And I think that's the responsibility. Take 10%, allocate it to those communities, and you will, I didn't say donate it. There's a difference.
No, I got you.
Just go donate 10, just go find it, allocate it, create programs, and if you didn't know them, I'm working with the NBA to find programs that you can do. I will help you put programs together that you want to do, but you have now a antidote and a social and economic responsibility to do it as an NBA player.
Kenny, I wish I had more time. I sense this would be good. I'm not disappointed. Let's continue the conversation at some point, man. Kenny, keep doing your thing. Appreciate it, buddy.
No problem. All right, man. Thanks for having me.